Вы в эфире, поехали.
Esteemed colleagues, good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you on the second day of our conference. We are holding our panel. It's entitled How to Improve the Efficiency of International Transportation in a Search for Compromise. We've got a really high-profile panelists. Our panelists are Mr. Shibatalov, Mr. Voronovich, a CEO, Federal Freight Company, Mr. Mikhail Ivanov, Deputy General Director for Development, Eurosip SPBTS, Alexei Shilo, Deputy Managing Director of JSC Russian Railways, head for the Center for Corporate Transport Services, and Pavel Larkov, Alexei Druzhinin, Irina Chiganashkina, Pavel Ivankin. The situation looks quite challenging despite the fact that in September, the business figures in September were moderately negative, and in October they were cautiously optimistic. But things kind of look shaky. Operating companies, expediting, dispatching companies, they must focus on attracting new freight into the network, because obviously the growth driver and the growth impulse has been no longer, which has emerged due to coal transports, no longer exists. We will discuss on how, on the one hand, logistics is a service function, and there is a surplus of wagons against the backdrop of shortage. Of course, clients feel confident in a situation of surplus of wagons, and this surplus has not yet hit critical figures, critical thresholds. It hasn't yet started damaging our industry, but there are bottlenecks which worry a lot of us. But there are, of course, things which there are measures which can be implemented to ensure the improvement of services and the improvement of logistics, because the speed of wagon turnover is a very important factor which might impact positively on the freight turnover. It will be something very positive for all market stakeholders. We are in a situation in which we must really do our best, and I would like to ask our panelists to address these issues. My first question is to Mr. Shilo. The uniform tariff list of the Russian Railways Company, this uniform tariff list does a lot to attract new freight, to ensure the stability, the industry stability. What is being done in this regard, and what steps are taken to attract more freight into the network? I would like to welcome all of our panelists and all of our members, discussion members. I'm first and foremost referring to my colleagues, with which we have we have agreed, we have concluded kind of an agreement the so-called water armistice, or water truce, to borrow the Book of the Jungle's language. We are continuing our work. We are continuing work on a system to accommodate Russia's biggest stakeholders, and the key component is an unified electronic service catalog. This catalog is comprised of software modules. These software modules, will be tested out. Are going to be tested out. Work on these modules has been finished, and we are going to roll it out quite soon. It's something which will be really be widely used, and it's comprised of the whole of contains all of the information, a lot of information on what we have to offer. I mean, what on the services offered by the Russian Railways Company and our subsidiaries and our partners. But to develop this uniform electronic catalog, we have to describe our processes. It so happened that we evolved individually, and sometimes it so happened that one and the same service evolved, was named differently, although it was identical, and we are now trying to remove these different names just for the sake of clarity. This uniform electronic catalog is a very good tool. You can use it to familiarize yourselves with the customer demand, with the progress of this demand, with the evolution of this demand, and you could just keep track of this demand to customize your services to customer needs. But to get back to our key points, let me just make this: 1/3 of all of our services has to do with dispatching, with the monitoring services, with the handling services. All of this helps us. And our partners to streamline our processes as well. Thank you. Well, it's kind of an answer to your question in a nutshell. Well, the work you're doing seems really fantastic to me. In order to be able to create such an electronic catalog, you have to describe your processes. And in each individual company, this attempt to describe things gives a huge boost to its competitiveness. But at this joint at which individual interests kind of coincide, from the standpoint of using locomotives. What does the Russian railway company offer its clients? Because it's a bottleneck. That has to be handled by individual operators, individual stakeholders, individually. Thank you. We often hear feedback from our clients. By the way, we've recently launched the so-called focus system to process client feedback. Sometimes clients complain of bottlenecks that have to do with locomotives. It's a huge challenge which can be broken down into two aspects. The first aspect has to do with interaction or cooperation. Speaking of the Russian railway system, I can assure you our company has no shortage of locomotives. We have several thousand of locomotives. We've got some of them in reserve. and shunt locomotives as well. Currently, about 150 locomotives are waiting to be used any time. But speaking of interaction, interaction is something really important. And for economic reasons, we feel the need, we find it necessary to keep some of them at the ready. But of course, we have to coordinate their usage with dispatches. Sometimes we see, wherever we see they are beginning to use more and more locomotives, then we'll have to assign individual locomotives to that client. So the first aspect is about planning or an operative interaction with our clients. The second aspect, as we see it, it's highly desirable to make sure that all of the processes and transactions are handled by professionals which specialized in it. For some reason, in Russia, logistical matters are addressed by freight forwarders and logists individually. They desire to have all of the services, to take care of everything themselves. But outsourcing these things enables our clients to just cut costs by 15 to 20%. And we are using our resources. We help to help them do it. Just to illustrate it, the RGD Logistical, the Russian Railways logistical company, helps handle logistical networks, offers a wide range of services. It helps use leased locomotives. About 30 locomotives, shunt locomotives, are now being used by the federal logistical company. Russia has about 13 sites that outsource shunt locomotive services and locomotive leasing services on site.
Последняя миля, так скажем, между инфраструктурой общего пользования и грузоотправительной
мы готовы были бы предоставить in this situation, in the current context, we'd be happy to render such services to individual clients and help clients cut costs. Thank you, Alexei Nikolaevich. Well, I have the pleasure to ask you questions. Please ask your questions in the chat box. Alexei Nikolaevich, in September, the loading figures reached last year's volumes. Let's hope the situation will extend into October. Do you think the situation will persist? We'll have to correct these figures. Our company is working hard to maintain this trend, and we interact with our colleagues to maintain this trend. Of course, there is a slump. We are experiencing a slump in terms of carrying oil products or black metals. But speaking of freight that requires smooth operations, construction materials, coals, we are doing well. Yeah, speaking of coal, our growth is 24.6%. So the trend is quite optimistic. And we are working hard just to make sure last year's loading volumes be met. I don't think I'll make a revelation. We are constantly correcting our forecasts.
который мы считали
This
достаточно
figure,
оптимистичным, он сегодня уже точно
3.4%,
достижим.
which we viewed as
Так аккуратно
optimistic,
скажу, что мы
and we
ставим
believe
перед
this
собой задачу
figure,
этот уровень
3.4%,
какой он
can be
будет,
reached,
будет зависеть,
definitely
конечно,
can be
в итоге
reached.
от нашей совместной
But
работы
the end
с
result
градостроителями и согласованием.
will certainly be shaped by our cooperation between our company and freight forwarders. Rashid Mr. Saibatalov, please, you have the floor.
To collect provided cargo is something that concerns all consignors. The question related to the routing, there's quite painful subject related to formation of the route for the general networks, but I'd like to not ask just this question, but touch upon the subject of general nature, improvement of the routing level. What do you see bottlenecks, and where's the responsibility zone in these bottlenecks? Where's the operator, where's the railroad? Good afternoon, everyone. Dear colleagues, Mikhail, company Russian Railways systemically works on improvement of the routing because we understand that this is one of the key components for increase of the speed of conveyance of cargo, shortening of the turnover time, improvement of the usage ratio. And due to this work during last 4 years, the level of routing increased more than 6% plus and has reached about 53%. Of course, if we consider the diversity of the cargoes, there's quite noticeable differences being observed because formation of the routes is being impacted by the opportunity of infrastructure of the consignor. It's the number, the length of the non-common tracks, the fleet of locomotives that are proprietary for these enterprises if they service their sidings with the traction. Now, if we use examples, very actively, this question has been worked on by the forwarders of the coal, or as the consequence, percentage of the routing for this nomenclature reached practically 88%. Last years, also we see activization of operation on this subject in this direction of the consignors of the petroleum and the liquid cargo. The situation that happened on the global markets of the petroleum products and OPEC Plus will slow down us, solving of this problem, and the oil people are lagging behind from the coal people, sometimes 2 times. Would like to have petroleum cargo go in direction of the seaports, should be routed at the level of at least about 60%. Besides, we see that this year we had record level of the grain crop in Povolzhye. It has to do with other regions, and today, based on the results of September operation, loading of grain increased by the factor of 2 and past the level of the last year. And the last times, the grain people also asked to organize routing. That's what we do, but unfortunately, they're not ready to form and give us grain fully that will be enough for the route of 71 rail car. This is the length that the Russian railways allow to pass through the network. So we have to draw, and we work on this together with them, and we will solve this problem. So this work will continue, and the help to this work is the appearance of new locomotives with increased traction characteristics that in principle would do a lot to make sure that the level of routing increased and exceed 60%. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rashid. So maybe another point regarding routing. There is a number of technological solutions that are peculiar to the Russian railways for acceleration of the turnover. Last year during Sochi conference we discussed the question and innovation that railways did in order to use the fleet of gondolas in Kuzbas city and the ports of Far East. What are technological solutions today you see the most promising in order to make sure that we provide efficient management of the fleet of the rolling stock? Thank you for your question. In my view, turnover of rail car should be divided into components. It's turnover of the loaded car and turnover of empty car. Because if we say that current year the turnover of the car is 16.3 days, then in general increase happened because of the presence of the rail car in empty state because of the non-demand. This part of the turnover increased by 22%. If we talk about turnover of the rail car, the transit rail cars in a local network, this indicator decreases in the transit by 11.9%, in local component more than 6%, and of course based on this, this is our key challenge. The challenge is shortage of the fleet for the freight operation. If you talk about loaded cars, and this is what we meant, in order to even more accelerate turnover, then one must understand that why under this condition we need to do it. In order to have more rail cars undemanded, and the rail cars occupy infrastructure of the RZD corporation. Otherwise, in order to make sure that these rail cars by the owners, the operators, purposefully placed on the tracks of general use through the contracts with the owners of the networks. Today, turnover of rail car is not the goal itself. Usually this question is being worked because of the shortage of the rail cars. I don't think that we need to actively do it, because acceleration of turnover is additional resource and additional cost. However, in order to, let's say, increase throughput by increasing of the throughput capacity at the directions towards the eastern ports, we take technological measures. They first of all relate to the increase of the weight of train, acquisition of new locomotives. This year we buy 108 locomotives with distributed traction that will allow next year to drive 15 trains from Kuzbas of 7,200 tons to Vladivostok. To drive these trains through BAM, we buy 36 3T TM 3-section locomotives, the heavy locomotives. And of course, we would like to make sure that 44% of the fleet of innovative rail cars that work on the eastern network, with increased axle load. From the south, next year, they will be relocated eastward. It's our goal. And I think that our goal, together with the owners of the cars and the consignors, were quite capable of solving. The next point, unquestionably, the technical innovations that have to do with virtual coupler, with application of which we can cut inter-train interval from 17 minutes 2 times up to 7, down to 7 minutes. And this is limiting point, so we can drive more trains per time. What you are talking about, universality of the rolling stock, is a very important question. It's important for the loading East Siberia Railway and the ports because it allows to minimize treatment of the port stations, near port stations. It allows additional reserve to increase volume of loading. Today we have agreement with 16 operators that work according to this principle. I will not mention them. I think they know each other perfectly, and of course the objective is that in this pool to engage more operators and more rail cars. It has to do not only gondola cars, it has to do with train cars for mass cargo and the coal loading stations, oil filling stations, construction load for the construction load rail cars, and they will operate with high efficiency. Thank you very much. We have questions from our viewers. Please hint us, can you assess the number of the trains on the in Oktyabrskaya and Far East and North Caucasus railways? And our viewers are asking, how do you solve the abandoned trains? Today, I wouldn't say it's a big problem. The problem was in the first half of year, because for every railway there were left about 100 empty trains. That was a problem. Today's situation is much better. Yes, certain segments we do planned maintenance. By the end of October we will continue this work. It has to do with the eastern network railways and the northwestern, such as Oktyabrskaya, northern railway, Sverdlovskaya, southern railway will work through November. If the trains are left, it happens for several reasons. One of the reasons is such: somewhere ports don't handle amounts, volumes at the near port stations. They don't provide the windows for the infrastructure maintenance, and limitation on the throughput purely technologically. We, for regulation of the train flow, we apply this measure. Today all railways are workable from the standpoint of presence of the throughput capacity, and the number of the abandoned trains will be raised after completion of the maintenance works. It will be, I think, in the first decade of November. Thank you. Thank you, Rashid. I won't let you go yet. From the standpoint of the maintenance and the windows, please tell us, what do you think the first half of the next year, will it be as much complicated as this year, and whether the situation that we have now will continue next year? The concept complexity is quite relative, because life is complicated. So it's not the question how complicated it is for everyone, but the action and the circumstances. We count on that with the forecast of the freight base that we have and the volume of the track works that we consider for the next year, and it will be clearly not higher and maybe even slightly less. Everything is being calculated and computed, and it's under consideration now. Situation will not be worse, clearly, due to the measures of which I told you right now, and presence of new locomotives and application of new technology of driving of the assembled container trains. Situation, I think, will be better than it was in the first half of the current year. The main thing now for us is that owners of rail cars clearly have to work on the end of current year and first quarter, I think even first half of the next year, since we'll have practically surplus of the rail cars, and during that period, so that the rail cars are not on our infrastructure and don't hinder movement of trains, I'd like to ask all esteemed colleagues to look at where they decide parking zones for the surplus rail cars. As the head of the directorate, if we use majority of the fleet, and we know they need to place rail cars on the tracks of the owners, on the sidings, if the number will be placed, it will not cause any complications. It will be improvement of the organization of the transportation process, and everyone will win. Thank you very much, Rashid. Now, question from our viewers for Alexey Nikolaevich Schiller. Alexey Nikolaevich, do Russian railways plan to increase transparency of automated systems, including tram system, for the users in terms of limitation of infrastructure? So it's continuation of which Rashid spoke. Yes, thank you for your question. First of all, to continue of what Rashid Ferdousevich said, just two words I'd like to add, and it's very important component regarding next year. We actively work with the consignors in terms of planning parameters of the next year. Key summary that we can make now, that all our clients, majority of our clients, adopted to the situation with coronavirus infection, which we have now. Oftentimes they ask question, how do you assess the second wave situation? We count on, our consignors count that next year will be much better. As for transparency, we do a lot of work, as you know, let's say, of delivering information about transportation to our clients. Every client can, free of charge, during transit time, can see the status of rail car. We provide free of charge information for the railcar owners, for our operators. The approach of the company is quite simple. We declared our approach, and more information our customers have, better, and they will handle the cargo and the rail cars, and technological process will win. As for limitations in our informational systems, I should say that tram system, its cargo goes through 50 checks, and the rail car will not be filed with the loading capacity if the treatment capacity of the consignee, such as seaport, it has to do with this. But the quality improvement of these parameters, I understand why you asked this question, is because clients not always can compare the limitation that comes to the tram system with assessment of the situation, what happens during trip of rail car. And the question comes oftentimes, I can say about novelty. Another novelty is dynamic loading of network program. It will assess the assessment of loading of network. It will be done not like it is done now. We see de facto where we have bottlenecks and traffic jams. We can predict traffic jams. We will understand that with high probability at given day we'll have complication with filing of the freight in this direction. We will solve this problem and increase transparency, which our clients want from us. Thank you, Alexey Mikhailovich. To understand you correctly, that what you said now is the question of now, in 2021, the system will be operational. We hope that the system is operational this year, and we'll actively use it in 2021. With the colleagues from the Central Directorate of Movement, we work on testing of this program. Thank you very much. I feel like This is, let's say, the most efficient and professional answer by the contractor in response to the customer. Because for the freight owner, especially for large companies, crucially important is situation related to the forecasting. With great pleasure, I'd like to give the floor to Viktor Kazimirovich from the Federal Freight Company, the operator from the General Network operator. Unlike other operators, to some extent, talk about the expectation of the customers. Maybe the first question to continue the topic that was specified by Rashid Ferdowsevich, such as whether we need to accelerate turnover of rail car. If we accelerate rail car, will we have surplus of the fleet? And part of the fleet will be undemanded. Federal Freight Company has a lot of gondolas not used for transportation. In principle, is the measure that the operator always uses in case if there is a surplus. Please tell us about it. How do you manage this mechanism?
So on the one hand, and on the other, just to expand on the topic touched upon by one of the previous speakers, I'm referring to the services which are in very high demand by wagon operators in order to improve the quality of the service. Well, we believe wagon railway car surplus is something typical of the market, of the railway market. And surplus is even more typical than deficit or shortage. The question is, how fast does it appear? It was back in 2018 and 18 that we were heading for a surplus. But back in 2019, we did have time. We were quite comfortable about it. Then we had a stress scenario. About 40,000 gondolas were no longer needed at the start of the year. About 70 to 80% of gondolas are in surplus, are not needed, but the market has adopted, has adjusted to the current situation. Such wagons have been are now standing idle in an idle mode. Some of them are kind of damaged. We can repair them. We can repair them within in 2 or 3 weeks' time, but there is no need for it. What about the idling of wagons? What else can we add? What else can we say about it? When wagons, railway cars, were no longer in shortage, then about 40% the costs of a wheel set dropped by 40%. So the cost of repairs has hit all-year minimums over a matter of 11 years. So the cost of repairs is very minimal. So the surplus situation is something we don't see for the first time. I think we see a similar situation. We've seen a similar situation 4 times over the past 10 years. But what really matters is if a market shrinks fast, then it becomes quite painful. Since we are a big company, it took us a long time to coordinate tariffs and rates with our clients. And we just took the following step. We published all of our rates and tariffs, taking into account our discounts, and we publicized it. We published it, made it public. There is a contract you can find online. You can sign this contract, and if a client, a customer, signs this contract, they find online, then it automatically becomes effective. This measure has removed, thanks to this measure, there is no longer the need to do much paperwork. We have removed a lot of bureaucratic barriers, and any client doesn't need to consult us, to contact us, to assess the quality and the rate of our services. As for changing the turnover of the wagon turnover, my point is that any work requires expenditures, any work requires additional resources. In the current situation, if a client wants to increase wagon turnover and is ready to pay, then the Russian railway company is willing to accommodate a customer like that. What's also very important, what is the variety of a railway wagon. If it's a innovative wagon, is one story, one situation, but what really matters in the current situations are factors like time and the speed, the arrival time, when it's going to arrive at the destination. Of course, people just like improvements, like good things, and people wish for themselves is to handle things like in Yandex Navigator, just to be able to know if they order a railway wagon, they want just to be sure it will arrive at the destination in 5 days from now. You know, it's like using Uber taxi. If we know that a wagon is moving, is in motion, or is located at a station, we want to know its status. Of course, like car navigators show us traffic jams, where there are traffic jams, where there are no traffic jams. A similar approach is desired by clients. And this will remove lots of problems, lots of issues. Well, a well-coordinated arrival time and departure time means predictability. That's why it's so important. And again, this predictability is something our partners, consignors and consignees really need, because our partners, consignees have to plan their resources, they have to plan their times, because they have to plan lots of things ahead. And you know, the truth of the matter is, we don't have to fight lots of things. We don't have to fight lots of things. We have to just streamline some of the things. That's the situation. If we don't make effort to cut costs, then we risk losing cargo, missing orders and missing clients, losing clients. So we just it's our desire to attract cargo into our network at all costs. Since 2016, we've been developing a product and we've been delivering it and we've entered into the market with this product. The main task of the product is to cut. So we have about 12 sites, several locomotives of our own. We've bought several new locomotives. We just own locomotives, and it's something very good, something very positive, because they enable us to offer us a trade-in option for locomotives. Those shunters which forwarders, consigners have on track are sometimes very old and obsolete. New, older shunters, shunting locomotives have an energy consumption or fuel consumption of 16 liters per hour, and the new ones, they only consume 9 liters per hour. So we try to optimize our technologies, our routing technologies, our loading technologies is one story. But it's a different situation when we try to embed our processes within the client's network. In other words, different shunting operations, the washing of railway cars, having to pay for the disposal of coal wastes. So we have created new approaches. We have improved the number of idling, the amount of idling time. We have created new approaches. We have introduced new approaches to reduce the amount of contamination of environmental damage. And today, our services costs, the cost of our services is 10% lower. The speed of loading is 20% higher. Sometimes we have a growth by 60%. And thanks to cutting costs, GCM costs, we achieve a situation in which we make money. We not just cut costs, we make money because we're not a charity project. We work to make money, and we've collected competences. Thank you, Viktor Kazimirovich. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Druzhinin. We have discussed this question already. It's quite a relevant issue. Why? We have a question from our text box, chat box. This question is about idling our rolling stock. Because we've always heard this thing, we've always heard our speakers say that we have to idle our rolling stock. But what can we do? What can we do about the money we have to pay for the idling? I've heard you are doing some work in this regard. Thank you, Mikhail. Thank you. We are trying. We are trying to overcome these challenges. So one of the options is to increase the situation, is to improve the situation that has to do with the idling of our rolling stock. This can be optimized on the rail tracks of shared usage and of not shared, which are not collectively used. Our partners have been gathering data on the throughput capacity of tracks which are not in common usage, just to get an idea of what's going on. We believe that non-collectively used tracks, they do have potential. They have throughput potential we could still tap into. I think we could use these non-collectively shared tracks for idling our rolling stock. And one of the issues we are going to take up with our Russian partners from the Russian railway company is to introduce differentiated rates for utilizing non-shadely using tracks for idling rolling stock. Yeah, it's like if you want to stand to idle your wagons on tracks which are heavily used, you'll have to pay more. But if you have an opportunity just to drive to idle your trains and wagons in some remote area, you'll be able to pay less. This issue requires most thorough attention, because we have to balance out lots of things here, like the tariffs, the fees, the loads. But changing fees, idling fees, depending on their location, on the idling location, is something very useful. Besides, we are working on this issue in coordination with our RGD colleagues. We are also considering the possibility of introducing some reduced idling fees for railway wagons, which are going to be idled over long periods of time. So we might consider some discounts. I think quite well-balanced solutions here are quite possible. Speaking of the work of the situation and of the work we did to identify idling locations, well, I think it would be quite an exciting. It's something exciting to create an interactive idling map for railway tracks in shared use and not in shared use. And railway operators, wagon operators, could use this map and they could just see the locations, the fees, and on the basis of these various factors like the location and the fees, the idling fees and idling locations, they might make their decision. Well, I think we could also empower the Russian Railways company to represent owners of tracks which are not in shared use, kind of enable these individual owners of such tracks be kind of a front organization, to serve as a front organization for such operators and for such owners. Just not for clients not to have to sign contracts with each of them individually. I say this option has potential. Mr. Saybatalov, please, do you have anything to add, in this regard? Well, I think it's quite an exciting idea. Well, I think it should be and could be further discussed. Please one should keep in mind that moving rolling stock at a distance will also require some money, because we'll have to divert them from the locations where they're not needed, or we must change the situation in such a way as to route such railway wagons to such idling locations immediately from the loading sites.
Interactive map, I think, it's not only necessity to mark Russian railways in terms of acceptance elements of the Russian railways, but also opportunity for the owners of the sidings in terms of the collaboration and agreement with them, even if it's not confidential information or commercial secret regarding the rates. In terms of placement of rail cars on those tracks, the rail car owner, the operator, will have opportunity to online see where's the nearest parking site of the undemanded wagon, whether the price fits the needs, fits the bill, and make decision. Of course, let's work on the subject together. I think that the outlook is quite good. Rashid, thank you very much. And now I'd like to give the floor to Irina Cheganashkina. And perhaps we can touch quite painful subject we can dedicate to the disconnection repair. In the plane of the question related to the acceleration of the turnover of wagon, the topic deserves attention. Irina, the floor is yours. What do you see bottlenecks, in terms of bottlenecks? Maybe it's difficult, maybe it's not difficult. What can be done to accelerate the turnover of a wagon and to make it more understandable and clear for the operators? Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, I'd like to argue with the colleagues who state that turnover of a wagon with situation of the surplus is not the most crucial item, because idling rail car requires less cost for maintenance and storage comparison to the working fleet. The working fleet needed to service the needs of the clients. If the turnover is down, the needed turnover fleet is less. Less costs at present time is needed to maintain needed fleet. And this is very substantial. So the rail car should go to the idle that needs to be repaired in depot or should be overhauled, putting into the reserve. We can offer better solution for the consignor that can be difficult. Also, acceleration of turnover allows to decrease the error of determining time of arrival to the place of loading. So, in the situation with the surplus of rail cars, turnover of wagon is no less important And of course, all our measures, inclusive of measures intended for perfection and modernization of rolling stock, must carry acceleration of turnover of wagons. We mentioned virtual couplings. If virtual coupling helps to increase throughput capacity of certain area of railway, but how to work on the turnover of rail car? We know that rail car standing, waiting for the operation at the marshalling yards, passing certain segments of railway. In order for the operator to afford something, he must see that finally the time of delivery of cargo is accelerated. That was not reviewed and didn't change for a long time. How the aforesaid disconnection repair can influence the turnover. Last year we conducted analysis and we noticed that disconnection of rail cars and disconnection repair TR2 divided at 60 by 40%, 60% of rail cars disconnected before beginning of transportation and even 40% underway. At present time, we are saying that TR2 is current repair underway is seriously longer and more complex in terms of paper, contracts and so on. Today Russian Railways cuts the number of the repair shops. Maybe it's justified, and rather situation with the placement of the current repair should be compared to the increase of the guaranteed length, ranges. It's positive, the ranges increase and the disconnection repair should be shortened, and then immutably disconnection for the current repair should be shortened. In the situation with the current disconnection repair carrier, in the given situation at present time, carrier is Russian Railways, should take all measures for the quickest organization of repair and release of rail cars after repair. When rail car is disconnected underway, the operator should make decision, the operator who is not participant of carriage should decide where to send rail car. The carrier in this situation is waiting for the request, whether he repairs the rail car or VRK or some other enterprise repairs the rail cars. These processes seriously increase time of idling under repair. We believe that shifting the disconnection for repair is necessary at the beginning and final operation. In this case, operator, the cargo owner, will be easier to efficiently, technologically to repair rail cars. Only at the initial and final stages it is possible to have market situation to organize current disconnection repair. Without carrier and the infrastructure owner, it's impossible to get by, because the general access railways are necessary, whether it's mobile repair, stationary repair. This question of the current disconnection repair has to do not only with the operators, but carrier, first of all, and infrastructure. Because the fact that faulty rail car is waiting for decision-making underway, that rail car is faulty, rolls to repair place. If it's seriously faulty, it's still moving and moving sometimes for longer distances. We need to work on this subject to have great reserve that will help to decrease needed turnover, fleet, in our total cost, that is the cost of rail transport, that today, as the colleague said, obviously at the earlier sessions, loses in terms of transportation of the automotive transport. If we talk about what should we do during COVID, during decrease of the volume of transportation, we also need to look at those consignors that switch to automotive transport and so on. As properly stated by Viktor Kazimirovich, very correctly said that shunting and PPGT is very serious costs at the level of cost for provisioning of rail car for conveyance, and this shunting costs hinder to return volume of cargo that shifted to automotive transport. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give floor to Mikhail Yurievich Ivanov, Deputy General Director of EuroSIP SPB. There is a nomenclature not only creates gladness, it is dynamically growing. It's container transportation. You, as the representative of one of the largest operators, as the member of the working group that works with Russian railways on container transportation working more efficiently, in few words, tell us what's going on. Tell us about the bottlenecks that still remain based on our preliminary survey. What can be done to increase the speed and decrease the load on the Russian railways employees? Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Mikhail, for your question. I would like to let me explain and tell about our interaction with the Russian railways and with the apparatus of the patented Central Directorate of Movement created working group that discuss on time very relevant, very needed questions regarding the market of container transportation. It's not only creating gladness, they maybe create sorry because they need to work 24/7. And through the working group during the union, within the union of operators and interaction with the Center of Patented Service, with Alexei Nikolaevich, we have full contact, and our working group that takes place every 2 months. Every time it looks like it's internal and external development. We have forks in our working group and separate questions that interrelated technological processes and technology of working with container trains. It's creation of the regulations, it's tariff creation, and the fourth direction. Starting from June, we started very important topic that we asked time ago, the planning of transportation, tariffication of the fleet, and tariffication of the transportation. When information travels at the level of each railway and sent CFO about the container train during months, we correct, especially it has to do with Rashid Ferdowsevich said that the eastern network, where every track is in deficit, and with the carrier we understand. During half year, we made joint decision regarding the rules of transportation of the container trains. From this, we have new decisions signed by the first Deputy General Director of Russian Railways, Mr. Krasnoshokov, regarding the rules and the order of operation of the container trains by carrier and other market participants. Hence, the technology offered by the movement people by forking and driving trains in coupled mode is welcomed. Also, we suggested certain things regarding this technology. Now it can be said the idea of the last year, but it is developing even more regarding the technology of the smart trains, shuttles, and big hub stations, and the near seaport stations, and the segments of railways. The smart technology is being in demand, and there are certain aspects. There are technological aspects, tarification, and the planning. Just some time ago, we assembled an Alexei Nikolaevich-led working group, and he said very interesting things regarding numbers. About tens of thousands of containers travel in non-organized trains. And this is what Rashid mentioned and he asked about routing. And there is very big volume of operation where we should work a lot on the formation plan and with the products and tarification of transportation so that they can be streamlined. I mean, to use smart technology or the freight expresses that will give a winning situation for the market. What are the reserves? Nowadays, the institute, and we know the special institute of railways, 2 minutes literally, yes. It has to do with me, I understand. The digitalization, digital models of operation of stations, interaction with terminals and sidings, that's why reserves can be found regarding technology of inspection of rail cars with containers. One may say the modern ways of inspection. The question was raised by our working group participants. In the working group of Alexei Nikolaevich, we expect the answer from Russian Railways, because the question of safety of movement is very important and should be very meticulous from all sides, and to inspect rail car when it arrives and container to inspect, and how to do it for the double operation. 6 million containers, and everyone is working on this subject. We open stations, we buy rail cars, we make technologies. The goal has been set and goal is being achieved. Thank you very much. And now, in conclusion of our discussion, I'd like to touch upon the subject, which is not a simple one, because competition with automotive transport, when we talk about large consigners, story is quite clear, but there are smaller companies which, let's say, process of coming to railways is so complicated, so critically limited. Pavel Ivankin, Institute of Research of Railway Transport Problems. And maybe now he will share with us regarding bottlenecks and the questions for a number of big cargo owners. And this cargo is quite expensive. Thank you, Mikhail. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'd like to mention several points. If we talk about that we need reserve for increase of loading, to increase of the accelerate turnover, it's customer that travels up to 2,000 kilometers. Russian railways already made step forward. There are expresses, there are overnight expresses. There's opportunity to deliver such cargo such as perishable goods, construction goods, that used only automotive transport. But if we talk about new customer, then we will have an obstacle. The obstacle is that the client can order automotive vehicle. At night, the vehicle is in Moscow and St. Petersburg. If the customer never worked with railways, then there are points you need to open ELS, you need to establish ITRAN, he needs to learn what's ASU, what is PNG, how to file the bill of lading. Going deep to easily get into details to work with automotive transport. In terms of containerization, what we see, it's easier. Container operator assumes part of the function, and the sender of one container doesn't go deep into the details of interaction with railways. We see good experience of Transcontainer, who practically for all consignors is the carrier and provides certain services. In this portion of the issue, maybe not all of them, but part of the operators will have chance to work on terms of the carrier. We have strict schedule of day express, overnight express. We have understanding that the operator engages small or carloads. We form the consolidated train. If the operator should pay for the 71 virtual, it should be flexible tariff policy and optimization of entry to railways. A lot is being transferred to the digital, and railways travel fast in this direction. If we talk about smaller conveyance, they're efficient. We need 2-3 loadings per month and control all schedules. Here, it takes certain finalization. The customer today faces with difficulty to get into the subject if he never worked with railways. For many operators, they have proprietary port, proprietary wagons. Transport safety question is very accurate. Sometimes the wagons were not delivered. The movement was problem. The disconnection repair, from one side, you need to enhance the control at the entrance on infrastructure. The general usage tracks don't want to tolerate faulty rail cars. Where there was braking, it's not the guilt of the operator, not the guilt of the cargo owners. But when everything is together, it's not clear who is responsible for what. When we understand who is responsible for what, the process is being systematic. We touched the subject of the abandoned trains. Majority of abandoned trains goes, according to the code 99, from West Siberian railways through the guilt of the consignee. If you say that there is shortage of locomotives or locomotive drivers, 94th code is prevailing. If you look at the first half year, according to 94th code, South, East and Gorkovsky Railway up to West Siberian Railways, they were far away. All these issues, they seem to be too far away.
So, while all of these issues are kind of seem too distant, but they're part of the issue, they're part of the situation. Well, we have to address issues like abandoned cars or decoupling for repair, but On the other hand, we must not abandon our clients. First they're faced with one issue, then another, then they have to download some software they can't really handle. It's not a good way. It's not a good course of action. Yes, we have managed to attract a lot of clients. But, these short distances of up to 2,000 kilometers hold very much promise. And I think we should look more into it to be able to attract new clients. So Pavel Anatolievich has raised a lot of delicate issues. Well, I'm looking forward to I need your feedback. I need your response. As it so happens, the Russian railway company could also make a contribution here. Okay, please, Mr. Schiller. We've addressed lots of exciting and challenging issues today, and some of them could take up a lot of time to discuss. Speaking of Irina's statement and the point she's made, today operators, as is seen by Russian railway providers, railway operators and cargo operators are fully fledged members of the process. If we act on this assumption, we must view the situation as such. Well, as I see it, those operators, cargo operators, who will just want to bring their railway wagons onto the market and leave it there, they will lose out a lot. They will lose a lot. But those who will keep track of the wagon and keep track of the customer needs, they will win. They will surely win. Now we are talking about ordering wagons with absolutely new specifications and characteristics. Speaking of idling and parking, wagon parking, Moscow has streamlined some of its parking procedures for railway wagons. Well, if we differentiate fees for using our infrastructure, we are not afraid of losing out tariff revenue. Our infrastructure is made for carrying goods, and it must be used as such. There may be some underused capacities, and we may tap into this potential, like allowing operators to idle their trains, to keep them there. And we believe the fees for using collectively used infrastructure must take a lot of factors into account, including indirect expenditures. And this approach that says the tariffs, the lower, the more distant the idling location, the lower the tariff. Well, I think this approach also requires some caution, just to avoid overloading our tracks, even non-shared use tracks. Speaking of the map, of the idling map, well, I would urge our operators, rail operators, to analyze and to think our electronic e-trading platform, so to speak. I think you could use this platform to identify location for idling your trains and your wagons. We often hear people say, you carry goods, you carry general goods, and it's the main source of your income. but it's not the case. From the standpoint of our income, if we break down our income, 16% of consigners who send small parcel goods, small amounts of goods, they generate 16% of our income, 40% of our income, and we'll have to fight for them using tariffs, but not only tariffs. It's not the fees and the tariffs which really matter to our operators, but the speeds, the timeliness, the punctuality, and information, transparency. So, we must make sure we grant easy access to our services, and liaising with our small size operators and small size clients are something which is really important. We are wrapping up our session. We haven't answered all of your questions, and I will please send your questions to us. I will just make sure we won't leave your questions unanswered in the chat.